And now this is objective 1, day 1, and this is problems 4 and 5, which are these two problems. And the last two problems will be in the next video that I'll put up. So the answers that you should have gotten were B and D for those two. So number 4 says the table below shows the relationship between P, the number of cell phones a company produces, and D, the number of cell phones that are defective. So you want to be real careful, and this is the trick of this question, to look at what P and D stand for. In this case, P stands for the number of cell phones a company produces. So that's here, number produced. And then D is the number that are defective. So that's a D right there. Okay, so the big mistake that TEA was looking for when they gave this problem was for people to mix up which one was which and put the numbers in the wrong place in the equation. You want to be really careful that you don't fall into that trap, and it's easy to just double check yourself before you start substituting. So we're going to try A and B, and once again I already know that B is the right answer, so I'm not going to bother with C and D, but if you were doing this on tax, I would expect you to do all 4 of them, and again all of these points before deciding that you have the right answer. So if we try A, it says D equals 20P. So we'll take the first D, which is 5, and the first P is 100. Okay, so obviously 20 times 100 is way bigger than 5, and so that can't possibly work. So A is wrong. The mistake that they were looking for you to do is to switch that 100 and that 5, and if you did that, that's a 20. If you did that, 20 times 5 is 100, and it would actually work out. So that was the mistake that they were looking for you to make, is switching your P and your D, like I said. So now let's do B. We have D is 5 again, 0.05, and my P is 100. So if I do 0.05 of 100, I get 5, and clearly 5 equals 5, so that works out.
Dana Castle, if you're still in the building, please call 61500. Dana Castle, please call 61500.
Okay, so I'm going to do one other point just to be on the safe side. We'll do this one right here. So you have 15 equals 0.05 times 300. And if you do it in the calculator, 0.05 times 300 is 15. And 15 does equal 15, so that works. So B is definitely your right answer. Again, you need to go through all of the points on the day of tax and just make sure that they work. And you need to go through all of the answer choices just to be sure that you're not missing anything. And then the last problem on here is number 5. And number 5 is really tricky, I think, because a lot of these tables have 3, or all of them actually, have 3 points that work in that equation and only 2 that are wrong, except for the right answer. And so if you only do a couple of points, you're going to get the wrong answer because you'll pick 2 that actually work. So let's do A and D just for the sake of illustration. So on A, if I plug in a negative 52 in place of the y there, and we have negative 2 times x is 4, negative 4, sorry, and again negative 4. So I've just plugged in negative 4 for both of these. I made sure to use parentheses before plugging in the negative 4. So we have negative 2 times, negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Okay, and we just drop down that negative 52. And so now negative 2 times 16 is negative 32. And 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. And you see that, in fact, this side, the right side, comes out to negative 52, and the left side is also negative 52. So that first point works, even though it's not the right answer. Let's try the next point. We have, in this case, negative 3 equals negative 2. And then I'm going to substitute in a negative 1 for my x. So here's negative 1, and here's negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Okay, so we have negative 3 equals negative 2, and then 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. And this is tricky because you can see that some people may say negative 2 times negative 5 is negative 3, but it's not. It's negative 7. You have to be careful and use your calculator if you need to on the day of tax. So negative 3 and negative 7 are not the same, and so clearly A doesn't work as an answer, even though the first point worked. And actually, if you went through and did them all, I think it's these 3 all work out for that one. So you have to be really careful with that. Okay, let me clear off some space. Okay, so we said A is wrong. Now we're going to try D, which we know is the right answer. So again, we start with our equation, and I'm going to put, actually, ignore that. I'm going to put a negative 33 for the y, and then we have a negative 3 for x. So negative 33 equals, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And then if we simplify that further, we get here negative 18 plus negative 15, which comes out to negative 33. And that ends up working. So we know that that first point works. I'll do one other point just to illustrate it, and then we'll call this one done. So let's try this last point right here. So we have negative 25 equals negative 2, and then we plug in a 5 here for my x. So we have negative 25 equals negative 2. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, and so we end up with here is negative 50. I can't write that far over. Plus this is 25. And so this comes out to negative 25 and negative 25, which of course is the same number. So D is definitely the right answer, but this problem is particularly tricky because there are so many that work in all of these. There's 3 in both B and C, and then A, of course, that work in this equation. And so you really need to go through all 5 points before you decide on an answer. And of course, they make it the very last answer choice is the right one because they want to trip you up.